In this exercise, we will look at the use of Express Sessions. We'll set up the Express Sessions middleware and then the Express Sessions file store middleware, and then set up our application to use Express Sessions rather than using the signed cookies as we did in the previous exercise. We will also see how the session information is itself tracked on the server side. To get started with this exercise, go to the Confusion Server folder in your terminal or command window, and then let's install Express Session. So to do that, type npm install Express Session and then session file store, because we'll be using the file store for persisting the session information. So we'll install the session file store npm module for that purpose. Once both of these are installed, and as you can see right now I'm using Express Session 1.15.6 and session file store as 1.2.0 in this course. Once both of them are installed, let's go to our Confusion Server application. Going to the Confusion Server application, up here, let's now import the Express Session. So we'll say var session require Express Session and var file store require session file store, and this takes the session as its parameter. This session referring to this that we have just imported earlier. Now once we do this, then we go down into our code here, and then we'll say instead of the cookie parser, so I'm just going to comment out the cookie parser from there, and then I will now use session here. And then we'll set up the session with the various options. We'll say name. I'm just using a random session ID here, and then secret. I will use the same secret that I used earlier. So let me just copy that string there. And then save uninitialized, save uninitialized false, resave false. These won't make much difference to the simple application that we are writing at this moment. And then we'll say store is new file store that we declared earlier. That's it. Now my session middleware is all set up to make use of our application. Now, as I mentioned, this session middleware will add this rec session to the request message. So I'm going to do a console log of rec session just to see what it contains. And then down below here, instead of checking for rec signed cookies user, I'm going to check for rec session user here. And then we'll look at the authorization header and so on. All this part will remain exactly the same as before. But here, instead of setting up the cookie, what I will set up here is instead of setting up the cookie, so instead of using res cookie here, we'll say rec session user equal to admin. So we're going to be setting up the user property on the rec session to admin here, and then proceed forward from this point. So the rest of the code here will remain exactly the same as before. There won't be any change here, and except right there we are going to be checking rec session user is admin or not. So that is the check that we're going to be doing here. That's it. Those are the changes that we need to do to our application in order to use sessions in the place of signed cookies. Let's save the changes and then look at this version of our Express server. Going back to our terminal or command window, let's restart our server. If your server has been running, just stop it and restart the server. And then once the server is up and running, we'll go to Postman and do a few requests. Going to Postman, let me clear out all these things. We'll clear out the headers. I'll clear out the authorization. And then I will go to cookies and I'm going to delete this user cookie because that cookie is no longer valid. And then let's send a GET request to the localhost dishes. And then as we expect, it comes back saying you're not authenticated. Now, so let's authenticate ourselves using basic authentication. So we'll say admin password, and then we'll update the request, and then we'll send a GET request to the same point, and then we get the reply back from our server side. Now note that in the headers, now you see again a set cookie here. Now this is being caused by the session store here. And when you look at the cookies, you see that there has been another cookie that is set up here, and the name is session ID. So this is the name that we gave for our session there. So that's the session ID that we are using here. And if you click on cookies, you will notice that the session ID is right there. And then these are the details of what is inside that cookie there. So you can notice a whole bunch of information and the expiry date for the cookie and so on. This may not make much sense to you at this moment, but it exists there. Now, let me clear out the authorization, and also from the header, let me remove this authorization header, and then I will resend the request. And you will notice that this request will be correctly serviced even now, because of the fact that this cookie exists, and this cookie will be included in the outgoing request, and the server side will map this to the appropriate session. And so the server realizes that this is an authorized user and will send back the reply. Now, going to our server console in the terminal or the command window, you notice that the information being printed on the server side. So see, you recall that I was logging the rec.session here. So this is what the rec.session contains initially. And then it says get dishes 401 not valid. At this point, you are sending in the appropriate authorization header there. And so your request succeeds properly. But then note what is being put out in the session in the next request. Recall that I removed the authorization header and then sent the request. But note what the rec.session contains here. In particular, note that it now contains this user field with the admin in place there. So this is what the server receives from our client side in the cookie, and the cookie itself contains all this information here. And so the server is recognizing that this is a valid user and then sends back the results from the server side. Going to Postman, let's again take a look at the details of what is inside the cookie. So when you open the cookie here, you again see all the details of the information inside the cookie here. If you look at your editor, you now see that in your editor, there is a new folder here called Sessions that has been created here. Now, this is because we were using file store to keep track of all our sessions. Now, that's one of the reasons why I use the file store, so that I can show you what is stored in a session file on my server side. So if you open this file here with a long name there, you would see inside there the session information being stored here. So if you browse this session information, note in particular this additional field that is in the server side. So this is where your server is tracking all this information on the server side. Now this cookie itself is recognized by the server. Since the client includes this cookie in the incoming request, now it is able to go into the session store and then retrieve the information and then load up this onto the rec.sessions, and hence the rec.session contains this particular information in there, which my server is using to cross-check to make sure that my client is an authorized client. That is it about sessions. With this, we complete this exercise. In this exercise, we have seen how we can set up our Express application to use sessions, and we also saw how we are using the file store to keep track of our sessions. This is a good time for you to do a git commit with the message Express Sessions Part 1.